Well, welcome. You are in the right place if you are here for the Active Living and Thriving Health. I am Kirsten Parsons with Ingleside and Westminster at Lake Ridge. I am joined by Gina Olson, who will be sharing with us today. I first just want to introduce you to the Ingleside communities. You may be familiar with our communities and have visited or are looking to the future and planning a visit. But I just want to introduce you to our community. So let me just share a different screen and want to share with you a little bit about who we are and what we're doing. So Ingleside is a not-for-profit life plan community. Ingleside is an organization of 3 total life plan communities. You may be familiar with the term continuing care retirement community. Those terms are used interchangeably. Really what it means is that a community has independent living, assisted living, and skilled nursing services all on one campus. And so Ingleside does have assisted living and memory programs that I specifically want to share with you about today, but just couch that in the broader understanding of it being a life plan community. So as I mentioned, we do have 3 sister communities. Our flagship community is Ingleside at Rock Creek in Northwest DC. This community, formerly known as the Presbyterian Home for Widows, dates back to the early 1900s, and we have been on this property in Northwest DC since the 60s. Our sister community, Westminster at Lake Ridge, where Gina comes to us today from, has been there for about 30 years, since the early 90s. It's the only one of our communities that does have cottages on the property. Again, a full life plan community as well. And then our baby sister, Ingleside at King Farm, located in Rockville, Maryland. So it is special that we've got a community in each of the areas. Westminster at Lake Ridge is located in Prince William County, Virginia. So I do want to share, in addition to being life plan communities with independent, assisted, and skilled services all on one campus, we're also doing quite a bit in the memory space. And so I just want to share with you, if you're not familiar, we do both have residential programs, so a place where an individual with cognitive change can be cared for both medically, so it's a residential setting with 24/7 nursing care, but then also that active programming and therapeutic services, so fitness specialists and horticulture therapy and art therapy and music therapy in that residential setting. We also have social day programs at 2 of our 3 communities. So at Westminster at Lake Ridge, that is part of Gina's scope of care for our residents and actually open to the greater public. So maybe Gina, you'll share a little bit more with us about Ingleside Engaged at Westminster at Lake Ridge, but we also have that social day program at Ingleside at King Farm in Rockville, Maryland. And so this is an opportunity for someone who's not even a resident of the community to be able to come and participate daily, pretty much during business hours, to be able to engage with other individuals who are also in the early stages of cognitive change, to have a meal together, to do those fitness classes and art therapy, and just have this really full agenda that they otherwise might not be spending their time that way at home, or sometimes we face isolation when there's that dementia that's just beginning. So I know Gina will share more about that, but I just wanted to introduce that. And then also that we have our own caregiver agency, Ingleside at Home. And so we are able to provide some of that medical care for individuals who want to age in place and stay maybe in their independent apartment or in their home setting. And so you're looking to supplement with certain memory programs and services in your own setting, but then you also need a little bit of care. So again, this is not a skilled care service, but really that companionship and some of those basic nursing care items, support with activities of daily living. We're able to do that through Ingleside at Home. One of the last things I want to mention is that as we have availability, we are able to offer respite programs. And so at both Ingleside at King Farm in Rockville, Maryland, and Ingleside at Rock Creek in Northwest DC, we are able to provide a 30-day respite stay in our residential memory program. And this is an opportunity for a family to trial this program and to say, you know, I don't know if this is going to be the right fit for my loved one, but what I want to do is see how they react in a setting where they are with other individuals, where they're part of a really full agenda. If that ends up them sleeping better at night or eating more at meals, and just kind of the impact that this has on their wellness overall. And so that's something that, again, as we have availability, we're able to offer. So if anything that I've shared, I know I've shared a lot in just a few minutes, but if anything that I've shared is of interest to you, or you think, you know what, I want to follow up on Ingleside at Home or Ingleside Engaged, our social day program, or the respite stay in our memory programs, then do reach out to me. That number that is listed is a cell phone. So if you are a texter and not a caller, you are welcome to shoot me a text and just say, hey, here's what I'm working through or what I'm thinking about. Can we jump on a call or can I come over to the community? So without further delay to Gina, I just want to pass it over. Gina is our memory programming director at Westminster at Lake Ridge. So she is overseeing our social day program and the services there to both our residents and the greater public. Gina, we are excited to hear from you today. Thank you. Last thing I want to mention, just a housekeeping item, we'll take questions in the chat in the Q&A feature. That allows individuals who are going to be watching this recording to actually just receive the content from Gina, and then we save those questions for the end, and we can answer those from either the chat or the Q&A feature. All righty.
All right. All right, so like Kirsten said, I'm Gina Olson. I am the Director of Memory Support and Programming here at Westminster at Lake Ridge. A little bit about me. I started my career as a clinical exercise physiologist and worked in and out of healthcare settings for quite a while. And also did quite a bit of personal training in-home and with people with chronic diseases. And then I came into the senior living field about, I would say, 4.5 years ago, and really had found my passion here. And I started off as the fitness and wellness manager, and then took on the role as director of memory support and programming a little over a year ago. And so, my background is varied. I'm a certified clinical exercise physiologist with the American College of Sports Medicine and a certified dementia practitioner and trainer. So today we're going to be talking, as it says, the connection between active living and thriving health. It's something that I think is really important to get out there and talk about, and how just important active living is. So just to give a little bit of our agenda that I'm going to be talking about, it will seem like I'm jumping around just a little bit, but there's a method to the madness. I will first discuss a little bit about, when we talk about wellness, what is wellness? And then we'll talk about some well communities, what is called the blue zones. And then we'll just do a little refresher on the brain and dementia, just to get that back out in the forefront, because we're going to go back to it later when we talk about all of the things that we can be doing in our lifestyle to help keep our brain health. And we will also talk about, of course, physical exercise in every chronic condition and how much it serves us to stay active. All right. So when we talk about wellness, I think sometimes people think wellness is just that physical wellness, right? That we're healthy, not having to go to the doctor a lot, and that's being well. But really, when we're talking about wellness, it is much bigger than that. And I liked this from the International Council on Active Aging. I liked how they kind of summed it up. Whereas wellness is the ability to understand, accept, and act upon our identity and capacity to lead a purpose-filled and engaged life. And in doing so, we can embrace our potential to pursue and optimize life's possibilities. So that's a lot to say in a short paragraph, but it really kind of envelops everything that it is to be a well person. Here at Ingleside Communities in Westminster at Lake Ridge, we talk about wellness as in 7 dimensions. Some models show 8, but ours is the 7 dimensions, which is environmental, intellectual, emotional, physical, social, spiritual, and occupational. And it's important that I put that out there at the front, just so you kind of have an idea. These are kind of all the pieces of the puzzle that come together for us to live a life, a thriving life, and be fully well. So when we're looking, again, that small piece of the puzzle that's physical, it's only one part of your well-being. I don't know how many people have heard of the Blue Zones. I did want to mention, actually, there's a brand new documentary out on Netflix right now, if you have Netflix, about the Blue Zones. I have not watched it myself yet, but I hear that it's very good. But the Blue Zones are these areas in the world where the most centurions are living, and not the most centurions living, but they are thriving past 100. And so we're constantly studying these areas to find out what is it about these areas that is so great for wellness. And so it breaks it down into a couple, a few different things that we found. The built environment is definitely one of them. So, improving roads and transportation options, parks and public spaces. Some of these areas are very much equipped to handle active going between places. You can walk there, you can bike there. There's natural paths built in. So we'll be talking about that. Municipal policies and ordinances. So it's about the marketing, it's about the culture, it's about banning certain types of food and smoking. And then we have what kind of restaurants, schools, grocery stores, faith-based organization, and workplaces. So we want to have healthier options for people to spend most of their time. Social networks. That is one of the big things we're going to get into here. That is a huge commonality with all of these Blue Zones, is they're to form and nurture social groups and social habits. The habitat. So it's the kind of homes that we're building. It is the area in that we're living. Are we surrounded by nature? And then our inner selves. They found in these areas, it is an emphasis on people to reduce stress, to lead a purpose-filled life, not to be in that busy, chaotic that we sometimes find ourselves. So one of the things that we talk about is that purpose-driven life. One of the things that is very common with all of the Blue Zones, which we'll get into exactly where those are here in a minute, but of course, waking up with a purpose is so important, and it doesn't matter what age you are. That is an important part of being human, is to have a purpose. Downtime. Some of these places have built-in rest times throughout the middle of the day. Meditation, and that slower pace of life, not rush, 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 go. These places have family first values. Everything spends, kind of revolves around your family is a priority there. Naturally being more active. Again, it goes back to that environment where everything's based around the ability to get around and move and be active. The nutrition. A lot of these places have mostly plant-based diets. We'll hear about Mediterranean diets a lot here when we're talking about heart and brain healthy. And certainly these areas are more geared towards that kind of nutrition. Belonging to groups, spirituality is so important. And in finding your group that is your people, that's a very important part of living in these areas as well. And I know this sounds a little strange, but wine with friends for dinner. So just even getting together, it's a normal part of their day. Neighbors coming together in these communities, they really form a tight-knit, almost second family with their neighbors and their community, which is something that is so important for our mental health, our cognition, all over well-being. So these places, they're known for, gatherings. It's just a part of their day. And where are they? So the Blue Zones, as we call them, one of them is Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, which is in Costa Rica, Icaria in Greece, and Loma Linda in California. So the United States did make it. Out there in California is one of those areas that seems to be really putting into practice, wellness there. So we're going to jump into now. I wanted to give a little bit of a refresher on the brain, a little bit about how it works, because as I get into this presentation, it'll be important to understand a little bit about what we're trying to preserve and what happens in typical aging with cognition and then atypical cognition as we age, such as dementia. So when we talk about the brain and its in the impacts that some of these dementia and diseases have on the brain, it's important to understand especially the frontal temporal lobe. Frontal lobe is that motor control, problem solving, speech areas. It's also kind of the frontal lobe responsible for those executive functioning and being able to plan. The temporal lobe, which is our language comprehension area, and a lot of our memory and information retrieval is in that lobe, along with auditory processing. Our brainstem is really all of our autonomic system. So everything, it's our involuntary responses. So it keeps your heart rate, your blood pressure, your body temperature is in your brainstem. Your cerebellum, which is your balance and coordination. Occipital lobe, which is sight and your visual reception and visual interpretation. And then the parietal lobe, which is body orientation, sensory discrimination. And you'll see as we get into it a little bit, just how these areas and being affected can change the way that your body behaves. All right, this is just a different look at it. I wanted to include this just to kind of break it down a little bit further, because a lot of times in the field when we're looking at brains and dementia, we talk about the prefrontal cortex, and that gets affected by many different diseases if there is something going on in the brain. And so that prefrontal cortex is a part of that frontal lobe. And if it gets damaged, we can see some issues with movement patterns, such as in Parkinson's. And it's also, the premotor cortex, which is right there nearby. That's our planning and coordination for movement. So our brain telling us, being able to transmit signals to our body for how we're going to move. And another part of our prefrontal cortex, like I said, is the executive functioning and behavior and personality, because believe it or not, a lot of these different kind of dementia, they may not present with memory. People tend to think of dementia as just a memory problem. Whereas if this part of the brain is affected, the first thing you might notice is a change in the person's personality, or their behavior suddenly change. So that is kind of where our prefrontal cortex comes into play. Neurons are something that it's really the messengers of our brain, right? So it's how the parts of the brain communicate to each other, and then also sends the messages and the signals out to the body. So if something happens to these neurons, which we'll talk about later, then it disrupts the ability of the brain to communicate to other parts of the brain, but also, again, to our body. And so neurons can also be referred to as nerve cells. So if you hear, nerve cell, that's kind of what they're referring to. Let's see if I can get this to go. All right. I like that video just because it gives you a short synopsis of what's going on, with neurons and really how they each part of the neuron and how it behaves in your brain, and then what happens if a part of that neuron gets destroyed. So normal aging, as far as cognition goes in the brain, as we age in general, we experience a slower recall. We may only remember certain parts of events. We can't recall every little tiny detail. But we're still able to follow spoken and written instructions. I'm sorry, my light just went out in my office. But we might start having difficulty concentrating. Whereas before we could do a lot and it didn't matter if we had the loud music playing and people going on, as we age, our brains just need a little bit more focus to concentrate on what we're doing. So fewer distractions. And our capacity to learn stays intact. However, in a normal aging, you may notice that it just takes a little bit longer to absorb the information, a little slower processing. Again, not something that it really interrupts your ability to go about your regular life, but just something, you might notice that, oh, in the past, I could learn this quickly with my flashcards, and now it's just taking me a little bit longer to absorb that information. That's all normal. And then when we start talking about a decline in cognition as we age that is not normal, so we're talking about not your normal aging. Not everybody who ages is going to have cognitive impairments, because when we start talking about cognitive impairment, it's an atypical loss of ability with your brain. So when we talk about dementia, it's really an overarching term, which we'll get into here in a minute about what all falls under dementia. But the DSM-5 classifies dementia as a neurocognitive disorder. Dementia may be either a major or mild neurocognitive disorder, or as we put it, mild, moderate cognitive impairment is sometimes the other terms that are used for that. Some of the symptoms is the loss of mental functioning that causes deficits in memory, language, learning ability, judgment, and orientation. There are specific diseases that cause dementia, and among them is Alzheimer's, which accounts for 2/3 of all dementia cases. So that is another thing that I hear a lot when I'm working with people, is that they thought that Alzheimer's and dementia were pretty much the same thing, can be interchanged, when in reality, Alzheimer's is just one kind of dementia, but it is one of the most common forms of dementia. Another thing that I get questioned a lot here in my job with people that are having loved ones go through some form of dementia is they want to know, what are the stages and where's my loved one at in that stage, or where am I in that stage, what stage? And it's really tough. Really, if we're talking clinically, they shy away from staging somebody because everybody's process is so different. If you've met one person with dementia, if you've only met that one, it's just so unique in each person. But Dr. Barry Reisberg is this is one of the popular models. He says there's 7. So no impairment, very mild decline, mild, moderate, moderately severe, severe, very severe. So it's really just a very vague outline as to the stages that you might go through. And there are different symptoms that come along with the stages. And really how we talk about where a person's at is what symptoms are presenting at the time. So I like this picture because it really kind of gives you that full picture of what dementia is. And again, it's that umbrella term, and it's a bunch of different conditions and symptoms underneath it. So of course we have Alzheimer's disease, which again it accounts for 2/3 of all dementia that is diagnosed. Lewy body dementia is also a fairly common form of dementia. And when I say common, I don't mean that a lot of people have it, but for people that are diagnosed with dementia, we see quite a bit of it. Frontotemporal degeneration, that frontal temporal lobe, again, that's sort of where you'll see behavior changes, the inability to kind of act appropriately sometimes in public and things like that. That can happen in frontotemporal. Traumatic brain injuries, vascular dementia. Vascular dementia is usually caused when somebody has a series of strokes or other kind of oxygen deprivation to their brain due to vascular episodes. And sometimes that can also be from seizures, a lot of seizures that have caused some damage, things like that. And then mixed dementia is something that I also see people being diagnosed with. And really what that means is they haven't been able to pinpoint exactly what kind of dementia that the person is experiencing. So it kind of falls under that mixed dementia. And then we have normal pressure hydrocephalus. And I've actually had some people here that we started noticing there was a change. And it was kind of sudden. It came on, and we're thinking, well, this isn't like this person. What is going on? And that hydrocephalus is really causes the pressure on the brain to go up so much that it causes dysfunction within the brain. And if they relieve that pressure in the brain, whether it's by shunt or some other kind of means, we start to see a little bit of a return of some of their ability. When we diagnose, it can be tricky to diagnose dementia, but it has come such a long way. Whereas in, years and years ago, it used to be the only way they could diagnose it for sure was post-mortem, really, and taking samples of the brain. Where now we've improved. Our scans are doing much better at picking things up. We use radioactive dyes, and it can show up the amyloid plaques. Okay, these are the plaques that happen in the plaques and tangles in Alzheimer's, and also these alpha-synuclein plaques that cause, which they call Lewy bodies. So in Lewy body dementia, you get these plaques in your brain. So these can actually light up those areas, and you can start to see where the tangles or the plaques are. Of course, sensory testing, hearing and vision, doing mini mental status exams. This is something that some insurance companies will have you do as you get older. But if you think about it, one thing that we're not very good at here in the United States right now is doing these at your primary care physician on a normal basis. We don't do many cognitive assessments until the patient says, I think there might be something going on. And then we look at it. Whereas if you think about any other part of your health, we're much more in preventive for things like heart disease, and monitoring for diabetes and other kinds of diseases, high blood pressure, everything. And we ignore the brain because people present very well at the doctors, right? You usually try to look your best. You go there showered and ready to go. Sometimes you have notes. And so a doctor's not going to necessarily pick up on what's actually going on. So I think, having screenings done at your primary care periodically would be a great thing. So now that we talked about the brain and some things that can happen, we're going to start getting into what it is to be active and how being active can really affect your brain health via prevention and also a treatment, quite frankly, for a lot of different diseases. And because I'm working in the industry I am, we see this a lot. People struggle with, do I accommodate, assist, or acquiesce to where I'm at in life? So it's really, I'm starting to decline a little bit. Do I just, I say, okay, well, that's fine. I am getting older, so I'm slowing down. That's normal. And, I'll just sit more. Or I don't feel comfortable anymore going up steps because that's getting harder. So I won't do steps. And so this is really one of those pivotal things that need to be looked at. Do we just kind of acquiesce to what's happening and change the environment that we're in? Or do we say, hey, yeah, this is getting harder, but I need to push a little bit out of my comfort zone, um, and try to improve my situation? And a lot of studies have found that it is in middle age when there's this critical time in the life. It's the time that you really got to put in the work, and keep what you have or gain fitness then. It's easier to maintain that way. Um, it's in middle age where we start making those decisions. If we start really focusing on our health, focusing on our physical ability in middle age, we tend to do much better as we get into older age. So it's much easier to maintain than it is to decline, 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 and start from down there. So if you're in your middle age, this is the time. This is the time to really, start picking up your activity. And I've always liked this quote: when is the last time you did something for the first time? Um, as we get older, when we're kids, we're constantly doing things that we've never done. And as we get older, we kind of just fall into this comfortable routine. And, oh, I've never gone to the gym by myself, or I've never lifted weights, so I'm not going to start now. It is never too late, never too late to start. Of course, you want to have a primary care physician before you start any new exercise program or change like that. But um, I've had clients and residents here that had never formally worked out before and started at age 78, 80, and thought, oh, okay, there really is something to this. So it's never too late to start. And then we're looking at and talking about the hierarchy of physical function, right? So it goes from physically elite to pretty severe disability. And I think all of us are aimed for, I mean, maybe some of us in older life want to still be physically elite, but most of us want to be physically independent, physically fit, somewhere in there. The goal is to maintain that physical function so that you can lead your life the way you want to, lead your life fully and really live. Along with that, and I touched upon this a little bit earlier, is that fear, risk, uncertainty, right? So it can be scary. As you start to notice some declines, you may start worrying about, am I going to fall? I feel unsafe when I go up the steps, so I just, maybe won't do that. And, a lot of times with my clients and our residents here, it is having to push out of that comfort zone a little bit, but first in a safe space, until they get more confident and are able to do it on their own. And then once you get more confident, then you're doing steps. That steps is a huge thing, that I find here, that people say, I moved in here, I'm in an apartment now. I don't do any steps. And I've noticed now that when I'm out and about and I'm trying to do steps, that I'm scared even just to take that step up the steps because I haven't had to do it. I don't have the strength to do it. And so this is something that people don't really think about, change their environment to something where there are no steps in their everyday life. But keeping up with that in the gym setting and some group classes, because it's so important when you're even stepping up on a curb outside, or you're going up, at your family's house, you go over there to visit and they have steps going up to the front door. So it's one of those activities of daily living that we take for granted until we don't have it anymore. So it's really important, if you start to see things like that slipping, that, we don't want fear to overtake and you just stop doing it altogether. Let's intervene, let's do something about it and get more confident with it. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about Dr. Kenneth Cooper. He really is kind of, I think of him as the godfather of exercise. He is a doctor of medicine. He was a former Air Force Lieutenant Colonel from Oklahoma. And he's the one who really pioneered the benefits of doing aerobic exercise for maintaining and improving health. And the Cooper Institute that he started, a lot of the research that comes out of there is what we use today to do a lot of our protocols, the fitness tests, and some, really where we get our baseline for a lot of what we do in the field. He served as a flight surgeon and director of the Aerospace Medical Laboratory. And again, he developed the 12-minute and 1.5-mile fitness tests and the aerobics point system, which is used in military schools, organizations worldwide. And why I've read about him in textbooks, the stress test protocols that I've run in the hospital systems came out of the Cooper Institute. And I had the privilege of hearing him speak at a conference last year. And not only hearing him speak, but I got to talk to him afterwards. And to me, it was like meeting a famous person. Here's this guy. He's in his 90s and he's thriving, and his cognition is fantastic. He stood up there, talking for an hour. He's just phenomenal. So he's doing something right. So I think it's important to take note that he's putting into practice what he has been studying his whole life. So when we look at exercise in America, this kind of gives us a good viewpoint on what was going on. Whereas in 1960s, exercise, people weren't, maybe 24%. It really wasn't a thing. We weren't really touting it as a healthy thing to do. So less than 24% of people were exercising, and less than 100,000 people were jogging at the time. Look at 1990, we've gone up to 40% of the population exercises, and 30 million people started jogging. And then fast forward even further, 2017, now 60% of the population, 55.9 million of the people were jogging. And this is due to, looking at all the research that's come out over the years about how important it is. Exercise really is medicine. And so we're going to look at some of those studies as well. So that change that we just talked about in that exercise habits that they were looking at over the course of time, what we saw was that there was a decrease, 48% decrease from 1968 to 1990 in cardiovascular deaths. That's huge, 48% decrease. And what the studies were finding was that most of it was attributed to these lifestyle changes, cigarette smoking cessation, cholesterol reduction, blood pressure control, stress management, and your increased activity, whereas 33% treatment. So we're seeing that lifestyle change, there was something to this, right? And that's kind of where the studies were going at the time. So the death from coronary heart disease, heart attacks, and other consequences of clogged arteries peaked in 1968. And that's what the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute says. And again, with that steep drop with 48%, it was such a steep decline when studying people who were exercising, leading active lives, and being physical activity that the medical community no longer could deny that. Finally, they were seeing just what happens and what the benefits are of physical activity. So another study that backs up what we were saying in that middle age is that the higher your cardiorespiratory fitness is in middle age, it's lower healthcare costs, an average of 22 years later in your life. So that just goes to show, it's just another study showing that how important it is wherever you're at to start. But, if you're still in that window of middle, now is the time to step in. Your health is going to pay off in the long run. And I think it's important that we talk about inflammation and chronic conditions, because all of the studies coming out now, and we saw it through COVID and how much inflammation was playing a part in really the symptoms and how well somebody was doing, was the inflammation. And so the scientific community is really looking at ways that we can reduce inflammation and how that can help prevent and sometimes, even treat some of these chronic conditions. So what causes chronic inflammation, right? What part of our lives, what is it that causes that? So one thing we look at is the oxidative stress, like pollution, smoking, so environmental hazards. And what does oxidative stress mean? It really means that your cells in your body undergo changes. And when these free radicals start attacking the cell, it can destruct the cell. This happens in our brain. Nerve cells that we talked about, the neurons, under a lot of inflammation, start to break down. Processed foods, we know that we're told to ignore, try not to eat processed foods, but that is also a huge one. Reducing sugar and refined carbohydrates. Inactivity causes inflammation to go up, and so does obesity. So when we talk about chronic inflammation and chronic disease, a lot of these disease processes are triggered by long-term, low-grade inflammation. So it's built up over time. And some of those things, again, can be, diabetes, injuries, infections, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, asthma, eye disorders, joint pain. All of these things are due to inflammation. So we really want to keep the inflammation in our bodies down. And one of the studies that I really liked, that kind of summed things up nicely, is for people, Alzheimer's disease is that brain full of plaques and tangles. But what they were finding was even more so, there's people out there that have these tangles, but they don't have the brain inflammation. And without the inflammation, there are no symptoms. That's just how powerful it is. With the neuroinflammation, that's where you get the neurodegeneration. That's where you get the breakdown of the nerve cells, depression, things like that. And the same goes to atherosclerosis, so clogged arteries. That is absolutely an inflammation process. Those plaques cause inflammation, which causes basically a scab to form in your arteries. And when all of the helper cells come to fix it, it just keeps building in the arteries. So it's the inflammation in there that's causing the plaque. All right, I kind of jumped the gun, talked about this already, but this is just a good diagram about what happens in your arteries and in your blood vessels. So this happens in your brain, it happens in your heart, it can happen throughout your body. And certainly hypertension has something to do with it as well. And hardening of the arteries can cause hypertension. So it's kind of a two-way street. But it's that inflammation within the arteries that causes all the problems for heart disease and neurological disease. So how can we lower our inflammation? And we talk about nutrition. And what you're going to notice here is that the nutrition for anti-inflammatory is pretty much the same nutrition that we talk about when we say brain health nutrition and, heart nutrition. Flavonoids is one of these things that is it's kind of a group that they found that the pharmacological effects of flavonoids in our foods is a strong antioxidant, anti-tumor, antiviral. And some of those foods are citrus fruits, apples, grapes, wines, the red wine, berries, tea and coffee, especially green tea, cocoa, more dark cocoa, real cocoa, not your fake chocolate. And of course, seeds and grains. These are all really healthy things that can help your body keep down the inflammation and act as antioxidants. So I, not only did Dr. Cooper stand up there and we were all in awe of the amazing man and his ability to still be on the forefront of what he does and just amazing. He put together a chart and it says how to get Cooperized. So if what this man that did all of this study as a medical doctor for years and years and years and years, these are the things he thought were most important, and that was keeping your body mass index below 25. I always say that, when you're doing BMI, it's important to know what percentage is body fat. BMI can be tricky because it's just a calculation, but if you see an exercise physiologist or somebody that can give you a true reading of your body fat percentage, keeping your body fat percentage low is important. Consume 5 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. So he says it, that's a recommendation in general, but that is something that is important. Exercising 30 minutes most days of the week, he says 5 days per week. It doesn't have to be all at one time. You can do 10 minutes in the morning. You can do, 10 minutes in the middle of your day. Getting 30 minutes in per day is important. Vitamin D3, 2000 IU daily. Of course, this goes with the caveat and making sure you check in with your doctor before starting supplements, but vitamin D is great antioxidant. No tobacco. And as far as alcohol and drugs, they're saying no drugs, of course. Maximum of 7 drinks for men and women of alcohol. And if it's red wine, even better. But minimizing the amount of alcohol. Stress control, exercise, meditation, relaxation techniques is so important. And getting comprehensive physical annual exams after the age of 50. So that's the other, important thing. I can't tell you how many people just even anybody really at any age, but do not see a doctor regularly. And I see it here a lot too. And just getting checked out is always good for prevention. So when we talk about this, increasing your brain health, the organic methods of increasing your brain health, that is diet, exercise, socialization, the meditation. I talk about brain exercises such as crosswords. Wordle's really popular right now. That's a good one. Things to keep your mind going. Dual tasking, which I will talk about in a minute. Music is huge for our brain health, and art. A part of the exercising, it used to be that they thought only aerobic exercise could really make that big of a difference as far as, heart disease and dementia. But further studies are now saying that, wait a minute, there's something to this strength training and cognition. And sometimes now they're saying it might be even just as important or more important. They saw normal ADOS cog scores, your cognitive scores, occurred in 48% after a resistance training regimen. So people that they started on this resistance training regimen ended up having normal ADOS scores, whereas 27% of them that did not do any kind of physical training did. And the benefits of physical activity is partly neuroplasticity. So I'm not sure if anybody's heard of neuroplasticity, but it's basically our brain's way of being able to heal, to rewire, to rebuild itself. Again, back, 30, 40 years ago, we really thought that once you lost your brain through traumatic injury or other ways, there was no regaining anything. And now we know that's not true. This brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, it's referred to as BDNF. So if you ever hear BDNF, can actually help with the growth and regeneration of neural connections. So regrowing those neurons, those nerve cells in your brain. So we see this all the time with kids that are born with, a brain injury or have a traumatic brain injury. But they're also saying now that even as we age and get older, we can still build these new connections through all the different things we were just talking about: exercise, doing your brain activities, eating well. So, ways to control your BDNF levels. We want them to be high, right? So we need to get sleep. Proper sleep is huge. That's when we do our regeneration of everything at night. Nutrition. Again, we want to make sure that we're having those antioxidant nutrition. Omega-3s are huge for this. Exercise, of course, and chronic stress. We need to lower our chronic stress levels. When adrenaline spikes, it lowers our BDNF. So keeping a calm body with low adrenaline is important. And lactate. So it used to be thought that, you work out, you do strength training, and you get sore. And we thought, yes, it's just a byproduct of our muscles breaking down. And it's a part of the kind of like the, healing process. We're going to drink water, we're going to flush it out. And that's what we thought about it. It wasn't necessarily bad, but we didn't know that there were benefits to it. And now all of the studies coming out are saying that this physical activity, you work out, you're sore the next day. That's because your blood lactate levels go up, the lactic acid. But it's been found to increase these BDNF expression and synthesis in the brain, which increases your neuroplasticity. So that being sore, not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that lactate is working and it raises your BDNF. And I had to keep this in here because I think this is fascinating, and I'm not recommending it to everybody because, of course, there's a lot of other reasons why some people cannot use saunas. But some studies have shown that those who use the sauna 2 to 3 times per week were 22% less likely to get dementia and 20% less likely to get Alzheimer's than those who did not use the sauna. They think it's due to that vasodilation. So when you're in the sauna and your body heats up, it causes your arteries, your veins to dilate, which increases the circulation. It causes relaxation, and there's multiple skin benefits to that as well. You just got to be careful if you're a person with high blood pressure, because saunas could increase your blood pressure. So that's just one of the things. But I think it's kind of crazy that some of these studies are saying that people that use the sauna 4 to 7 times a week were 66% less likely to get dementia and 65% less likely to get Alzheimer's than those who use the sauna once per week. So it seems like it's even the more you use it, the more benefit. I really like this. And due to time, and I'm sure, hearing me speak so much, I'm not going to play this whole video, but we know how important music is. It can activate memories. It can unlock certain parts of your brain. We find that using music is huge when working with people with dementia. And a lot of the studies go along with that. Finding if you find the music that this person used to listen to, all of a sudden they open up and they start talking about all these different things. It's so important for people with dementia. And also to keep your mind sharp. Any way that you can activate your brain like that is important. And if you're interested in watching it, you can watch it on YouTube. The benefits of music for dementia. And the copy of this will be going out to everybody, so you can see it then too. Meditation, we spoke about this, and more studies confirm the efficacy of meditation in the prevention and treatment of cognitive decline, mental health disorders, Parkinson's, etc. I highly recommend, when I do this presentation live, we all do a chocolate meditation together. I use Dove dark chocolate. That's just for me. But it's a very nice mindful meditation that helps with relaxation, and it involves chocolate. So this is another thing. If you want to look it up and follow along and do the mindful eating chocolate meditation on YouTube, I highly recommend it. It's always a big hit when I do it here. And then we talk about brain fitness. So there's a lot of different programs out there now. Brain HQ is one of them. We did a little bit of a pilot program here at Westminster. I ran through about 20 of my residents to see how it worked with them. But it's just a lot of brain games. And even there's so many apps out there now where you can do puzzles and things like that that are also like the Brain HQ type thing. But I do recommend you can check out Brain HQ. I think it's really good. It looks at different parts of your cognition and kind of hones in on different areas you might be struggling in. And, we know that working your brain in these ways helps with neuroplasticity, helps with keeping your neurons firing, and is really important for keeping your brain stimulated. This is that dual tasking I mentioned briefly. What dual tasking is and why I think it's important to mention is this is kind of where the field is really going, especially with senior fitness, but really for everybody at all ages. So combining a cognitive task while doing physical activity is a way that it really optimizes the benefits you're getting from that exercise. You're getting the neuroplasticity and physical function at the same time. And again, there's many different types of tools out there now available for this, but I do it a lot in my group classes that I teach. I'll have people spell their name backwards while we're marching out loud. Do kind of like a lunge into clocks, and I make them lunge to different times on an imaginary clock, things like that. So ways that you're getting your brain working in a different way while your body's moving really helps to improve those neural connections, and is so important with challenging yourself. I also highly recommend you try there goes my light again, the Stroop task. This you can find also on YouTube. I do this one in person with my groups here, but it's a really cool challenge, and I think you would really enjoy it. It's another kind of brain game type thing, but it's fun, it's enjoyable. So I highly recommend you check out Stroop task. And again, we're talking about the diet. We know how important it is. Eating a heart healthy diet is the same as eating a brain healthy diet. So there's omega-3s, those good fatty fishes like salmon, getting in the lean proteins. Your green veggies, especially green leafy vegetables, are especially important when talking about what kind of nutrition that you need. Berries, again, they have those flavonoids in it that we talked about. Tea and coffee. Studies have actually shown that, a little bit of caffeine doesn't just wake you up in the moment, but it actually has you score higher on mental function tests overall. So it's not just that acute effect. They're finding that it actually helps with your mental acuity. And walnuts. And I love walnuts because they actually look like little brains. So next time you have a walnut, you have to look at the walnut. It actually looks like the perfect two little spheres of the brain. It's great. Hemispheres. So it's not only great protein, it's that healthy fat. And so you're getting a kind of double benefit there. And socialization, so important for your brain health. When we talked about the blue zones, they keep going back and studying it more and more and more, and saying that they really believe the common denominator is how social people are. I think we all saw it during COVID when we were isolated, and just how much that affected our, not only our kind of mental health, but cognition as well. We saw it a lot here. I had a dear resident tell me that she had isolated herself so much that she lost the ability to really speak well, because she wasn't speaking to anybody. She wasn't out speaking to anybody. That's kind of an extreme, but when she started coming back out and started working, I did a brain boot camp program here. And when she started participating in that, she said, oh my gosh, I'm able to like form my words again better. I'm getting sharper. And just being around people is extremely important. People that are lonely tend to have struggle with dementia. A study of over 12,000 people concluded that when people are lonely, their risk of dementia rises by as much as 40%. 40%. And that's why, you know, living in a community like Westminster, the other Ingleside communities, and other CCRCs is so one of the many reasons why it's so beneficial to your health, because here you're not isolated in your home by yourself. You have the ability to go out and socialize with over 130, you know, clubs or committees. So that is very important. And sleep is so important. One thing that I take to heart, try to share with people as much as possible, is getting 4 to 5 hours of uninterrupted sleep. So that doesn't mean total. We're talking about 4 to 5 straight hours of sleep where you're not getting up and down to pee. It takes that long for really your brain to get all the effects of that natural recovery, your brain recovery, your physical recovery. And you'll start to notice that if you start losing that sleep, that regenerative, restorative sleep, your cognition slips. I think we've all experienced that. I haven't gotten much sleep and my brain's not working at, you know, optimal levels. I think all of us have been through that. So it's just really critical. And, you know, I always say protect your sleep, make it a priority, protect your sleep. It's so important. And I just wanted to briefly touch upon what I personally am doing here at our community for our residents here to really keep them as healthy as can be, especially with their brain health. It's a huge concern for all of us, no matter what your age is. Well, maybe children, they don't think they're ever going to have any kind of cognition decline. So, but it's always on the forefront. We want to stay independent. We want to stay sharp. We don't want to have any loss of that kind of function. So I developed what I called Brain Boot Camp. It's a 12-week course. I kind of combined a stronger memory program, which is a different program, with my own programming. So we do different brain things, physical activity for sure. And really, I had some really great outcomes from my first 12-week course that I had held, had over 50 of our residents. And some said they noticed really large improvements in their ability to remember things. Their just processing got faster. But also what was very important to note is that it's important to keep doing those things, because you'll slide right backwards if you don't keep up with it. And this is our Ingleside Engage Social Day program. This is definitely a big passion of mine, a big need here at our community, and I think in the greater community. It is for people with mild to moderate cognitive impairment, and it really is therapeutic programming. And you know, all the programming we do is intentional with helping people to stay as sharp as possible, to socialize, because so many people that start having the early stages of dementia start isolating themselves. So here they're around, you know, people just like them, and it's really a place to thrive. We've had some really great outcomes. And on top of that, it's really, really important for anybody who's a caregiver to have some respite time for themselves. Burning out is something that happens to anybody when you are the sole caregiver, the primary caregiver for somebody. So this gives that caregiver time to be whatever it is. You know, some of them are like, I took a 3-hour nap, and that is great. You know, some of them do their shopping or whatever it may be. I think it's important. So it's so important for both the individual to maintain the cognition that they do have, and for the caregivers. And so that's a little bit about our day program that we run here. And finding your why, that's so important. Motivation is the fuel necessary to keep the human engine running. And it's so true. Whether your motivation is, fueled by the want to be able to still hold your grandchildren, or your motivation is I'm going to hike out Everest. I don't know where you're at, what you're doing. It could be as simple as I have people that said, Gina, I need to be able to get up off the floor. If I want to sit down on the floor, I want to be able to get up off the floor. That's my motivation. And then I have others who's motivated to, run a 5K. So finding your motivation, whatever that may be, is important when we're talking about keeping active and focusing on your health. All right, so that is all. I know it was a lot. It was a lot in a short period of time, but I do know this is being recorded and will be sent out. So hopefully you can catch some more about that there. Does anybody have any questions? No?
Gina, I just want to thank you for spending your time with us. And even as a former clinician, so much of what you shared was just a great reminder. I feel like you hit on all of the high points of things that people spend their whole career educating on. And in 1 hour, you give us a great synopsis. So thank you. As Gina mentioned, we do have the slides that we can share and a recording of this event. So you are actually welcome to share it with other people in your circles. If you're in a support group or just generally talking about wellness or dementia prevention with others, feel free to share both the link to the recording and the slides. And then if you do have questions, you are certainly welcome to email those in after the fact as well. So have a great afternoon, and thank you for spending a portion of your day with Ingleside.
Yeah, thank you.